On the channel way back since Classic, I have done raid reviews after the second reset of a new tier has concluded. Now, usually I wouldn't bother with the opening tier of an expansion simply because a pretty sizable portion of the player base are still working on leveling, and it would just be looking at data from more hardcore players. But there are two main reasons why I've decided that I want to talk about tier 7. Number one is that everyone had a week and a half to level before any raid content released, and the second is that there were no lengthy achievements this time around, which would hold people's progress back. Wrath, being very true to its nature, has had a very accessible opening tier for any type of player. Though in addition to the clear rates for the raid today, I also want to check out class population and average performance so far. This will be a bit of a new addition for this video, but I want to look at it now so that we have things to compare to when later raids release. Few things to keep in mind here. Numbers are going to be looking pretty huge for Wrath, and aside from the popularity of the game, there are good reasons for that. Usually progression kills will just be the first instance of you defeating a boss. However, now we have multiple difficulties, your guild will have progression logged for both 10 and 25 man. Also, when we go on to look at pass numbers, they're going to be extremely high because there are a possible 34 bosses to go through each week at the moment in tier 7, which is quite a lot. So with a grain of salt being taken and all that being said, this week showed the highest number of players ever recorded on Ironforge.pro in World of Warcraft Classic raid. It's only week 2 of Wrath, and the overall number of people interacting with raid content has already beaten out the previous record, which was the launch of WillE back in Classic. But surely that's just down to multiple logs from 10 and 25 man, right? Well, in part I want to say yes, but on top of that, Warcraft log creator Kira tweeted that Classic Warcraft log had its highest one-day traffic total ever, beating all previous days in TBC and Vanilla at the start of the second reset. So even though numbers are pretty high and maybe a bit higher than they should be, Wrath is definitely extremely popular. And this is after 2 weeks. Numbers will only go up more as more players have time to finish leveling and being able to get into raiding content. Let's touch on how many people have successfully cleared the content though. Even for this early stage, it is a lot. Here are some ballpark numbers from some of the more challenging encounters from TBC Classic. By the second reset, there were 2,093 kills on a pre-nerf Lady Vash in Serpent Shrine Cavern, and after 2 weeks of the Sunwell, there were 3,663 kills on Kill Jaden at the end of the Sunwell. As of today and doing this video, there are well over that number combined of raiding teams that have completed 17 out of 17, standing at just under 12,000, and this is with tier 7 content being buffed by 30% in damage and health, by the way. So predictably, tier 7 is a notable step down in difficulty from either pre-nerf tier 5 or the Sunwell. Were there any real challenges in tier 7 at all then? Well, on 25 man, the easiest boss was Maexner, whilst the most wiped on encounter is Sartharion, followed closely by Instructor Resuvius second and Patchwork third. I think Sartharion 3 Drake, specifically 10 man, is the hardest encounter this phase by far, and stats reflect that, with just over 140,000 wipes caused in the first 2 weeks by this variation of the encounter. In case you want some stats from TBC, Muru caused over 600,000 wipes by the end of week 2, by the way. Warcraft logs also at this point in time does not make a distinction for hard mode kill progression when it comes to Sartharion, and it only does that for speed and execution, so your first 0 Drake's kill could count towards your Sartharion progression if that's what you did. Hopefully this is updated for Ulduar, where loads of the fights have hard modes. And saying this, there are already guilds appearing to be successfully running the Zerg strats on Sarth 3D, even though Blizzard buffed the health of the encounter massively to try and avoid this. So all in all, Wrath raiding so far has proven very popular, be it on mains or alts, and B, pretty straightforward and easy as a whole. There are some levels of challenge from Sartharion 3 Drake specifically, and that fight feels like a bit of an early version of Cataclysm Heroics, where it's not quite correctly tuned for 10 man compared to 25 man. If and when we get to Cataclysm, you'll see what I'm talking about here. So that's how the raids are looking, but which class is coming out on top? Are the predictions holding true so far, and have we had any surprises? Well, here it is. In brief, to explain what you're looking at, this is data from everyone who has logged their raids within the first 2 weeks. This view is across all boss kills. The line for each class represents the low on the left hand side to the medium and upper quartile of performance, and the dot on the far right is the maximum performance achieved. I think the 3 classes at the top are ones which were very much predicted to be there. The safe bets for tier 7 were always going to be Warlock, Death Knight, Rogue. For Warlocks, both Affliction and Demonology are flying at the moment, and Destruction isn't doing half bad either. Certainly better than I thought it would be. Then again, the other 2 specs exist, so it's more for fun. The new class in the Death Knight has got off very well. Unholy Summon Gargoyle being available for every single boss thanks to cooldowns resetting is really pushing them up the meters, and the faster boss fights get, the better this spec will look. I thought Frost DKs would be a little more up there, but they haven't been doing bad as a whole. Rogue has also been doing great. Both combat and assassination are looking amazing at the moment, with assassination generally being preferred early. Notably, Rogues have been able to combine Fell Striker and the focused attacks talent to become the strongest burst AoE DPS class in the game. This makes them amazing on trash, whilst also being one of the best choices on single target as well. The middle of the pack is what I expected it to be, if I'm honest. The Hunters, Mages, perhaps I thought Arcane would be a little bit higher than this, the Shadow Priests, the Shamans, and so on. Towards the bottom of the DPS, well, this time around the predictions here have been true. Warriors are not looking so good in tier 7. Unexpectedly, Fury has had the potential to outperform Arms, but Arms at this point in time brings more valuable buffs to the raid. Warriors, unlike TBC, this time around it appears as though you are playing the long game, stay patient and wait for that armor penetration to become available later on. Feral Druid has seen a massive variance in performance. Now, tanking Druids, which are called Guardian on Warcraft logs, as they are in retail, are tracked separately. I think this has something to do with Druids occasionally tanking, but not always tanking. You see where it says Gladiator Warrior at the bottom? That category was made for this reason. It's for warriors who tank sometimes, but not on every single boss. Though I think the high variance on Feral is also due to the high skill ceiling on the specialization. Finally, Retribution Paladins are way down there. I expected them to be a bit more in the middle of the pack, but they're also not doing too great. And this is tier 7, which is full of undead, which benefits them a lot. So it's looking as though it's going to be utility spec all the way up to Icecrown Citadel, where they finally get their tier 10 and can begin to really take off. If the quote-unquote meme specs for PvE like Sub-Rogue, Frostmage, and BM Hunter are close to you, that's not really a good look. Next up, what has been the most popular class specialization for each role? This will be done looking at passes, a pass being an individual boss kill which has been logged. So if you go and kill Hygen, that will be one pass, then you go do Lothab afterwards, that will be another pass. In other words, there's going to be a lot of them. The most popular specialization in the game currently is somehow Arcane Mage, with just over 1.6 million passes recorded, followed by Assassination Rogues with just under 1.4 million passes, and Unholy Death Knight with about 1.1 million. The least popular is a bit hard to say. If we took it from the stance of the meta, you're expected to play this in tier 7 type spec, I'd go as far to say the lowest represented one is Enhancement Shaman, but you can see the numbers here and be the judge of that for yourself. Next, a look at healers here. You can see Discipline Priests are doing very well early on. That shield spam preventing damage from ever happening is stopping other healers, showing what they are really capable of. And overall, this list is quite balanced, much more so than DPS. In terms of passes logged, Holy Pala is the clear leader with some 1.5 million passes. Since when does any healer come even close to the number of the most played DPS? Followed by Discipline Priest with just north of 1 million passes. Holy Priest is the least represented here, though is actually performing quite well according to Warcraft logs. Finally, I want to show some numbers for the tanks too. It's a bit harder to gauge performance for tanks, it just always has been. How do you put a number on holding aggro and not dying? Anyways, I just picked damage to bosses for tanks as a metric here. I wouldn't even look at that data too much. In case you're wondering, a Champion Warrior is a protection warrior that's also spec'd a bit more into doing DPS. I'm assuming this is the unrelenting assault build that does way more damage. Anyways, pass number wise, it is exactly what I expected to see. Protection Paladin is top with 365,000 passes logged over 2 weeks, followed by the Blood DK with 235,000, and then Protection Warrior, and finally Guardian Druid. So that's how classes are performing and what is most popular at this early stage. But what are people actually playing? Well, I can give you an estimate for that as well. Based upon data collected for the site WoW Classic Pop through scanning populations via an add-on, some 517,000 level 80 players have been seen across all Wrath Classic realms so far. The most popular class in the game, unsurprisingly, is Paladin, with the average server having 17% of their population made up of this class. There are 10 classes, by the way, followed closely, rather impressively, in second place by the new class, the Death Knight, which averages to be 13% of a given server's population. Third place, again, I wouldn't have bet on it, is Druid, making up around 10% of the average server's population, a balanced number for a class that has a balanced spec. Least popular classes on average are by far Hunter, with only a 7% average representation. Looks like play what you enjoy doesn't really happen in reality. Hunter went from one of the most popular picks in TBC, where it was a top DPS, to the least popular in Wrath, where it's known to be more middle of the pack. The second least popular is Rogue, which for how well we've seen them doing and how well they will continue to do is surprising as well. Most of the other classes are fairly balanced on average, though I'd say as for representation compared to performance, there could definitely be more Warlocks and more Rogues. You can go and look at this on your own server, by the way, I'll link it below. Some servers have nearly 20% Paladin and 5% Hunters, by the way, it's crazy. I'm just saying, if you want an ult which gets raid spots and it's easy to gear, people want Rogues and Hunters, you know, they're both useful, and agility gear is just being wasted left and right at the moment. Making an ult DK that you intend to pug with, on the other hand, might be a bit more of an uphill battle, but as I say, do check it out on your server. The final point is that Horde have reached 55% faction majority now across a level 80 players as per this site. Yes, humans are sure good in PvP, but the PvE Horde player base are currently enjoying their troll berserking and orcs buffed to Blood Fury. Trend will continue this way as content gets more challenging, by the way. And that is it. Again, this is stuff to be all taken with a grain of salt. Nothing is released by Blizzard as to player numbers, it's all just ways players have invented to track them, but I think it's fun to look at and see how things are getting on. That's everything though, let me know how you thought it all looked, and as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.